Hey everyone, you guys know what it is. It is time for the last sew along as part of my hashtag business wardrobe series. Now, back in March, I said that I was going to take 4 patterns and do a complete sew along for 4 different patterns and show you how you build your own wardrobe. And I've been doing that. This is the last one using Butterick 6718. So there's 2 videos. The first part is doing the jacket and the pants, and then the second video will be the top, the skirt, and the dress. Now, if that's some content you would like to see, keep on watching. Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. My name is Rochelle from Rochelle.Handmade.Designs, and in this video we are finally doing a sew along. I know you guys have been asking me for a couple of sew alongs, and you guys know I always tend to deliver when I can. Now in this video, this will be the jacket and the pants for the sew along, view A and view E. So don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Turn on the notification bell so you are notified every time I upload a new video. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get right on into this sew along. All right, everyone, let's go ahead and get started with the jacket. So the jacket is view A in this sew along that we are doing. The pattern pieces that you will need is pattern piece 1 through 5, which are your front, your upper back, your lower back, your sleeves, and your lapel. Also take note of the fabric cutting layout. What is meant by the right side of your pattern, wrong side of your pattern, right side of your fabric, and the wrong side of your fabric. Also, make note of the way you cut your jacket out. Just make sure that you know that right sides of your fabric will be facing each other when you lay your pattern pieces on your fabric. The only pattern piece that you need to have with the right side of the pattern facing down on the fabric and the wrong side facing up is pattern piece number 2. So you have wrong side of pattern facing up on the fabric as you see in the cutting layout right here, okay? Also, you will need lining fabric. You will only be cutting lining on pattern piece number 1, 2, 3, and 4, okay? Now, you're cutting basically the outside shell of a lining fabric. Now, if you do not want the bottom portion, which is your lower back, to show, if you're using a print like me, if you do not want it to show, then I highly advise you to use the same fabric, which is what I will be doing in mine, okay? So you'll notice that the lining fabric for pattern piece number 3, which is the lower back, will not be the Ankara fabric that I am using because I'm trying to use more of my scrap fabric. So I'm using Ankara fabric as my lining, but just not for pattern piece number 3. I'm just using it for my front, back, and my sleeve lining. All right, I think that's it for the instructions itself. The only notion that you will need for the jacket is thread, okay? You don't need any buttons, no snaps, no zippers, none of that. The only other thing outside of thread is interfacing and lining. That's it. So let's talk a little bit about the glossary. Make sure you read the glossary. The seam allowance is 5/8 of an inch seam allowance unless otherwise indicated, all right? So one more note before we get started is I will be sewing the lining and the main fabric together at the same time. It cuts down on how many times I go back and forth to the sewing machine. So you will see me pin the main fabric and pin the lining at the same time. So when I'm done constructing the entire garment of the main shell, the lining is already done and I just need to attach the lining to the main jacket, okay? So just follow along. Pause when you can. If you do not have 2 sewing machines to set one up for main fabric, one up for lining fabric, if you have different color threads or whatever that you need to use, you could set up 2 machines, or you could do like I have done in the past of switching out the threads as needed. You do not want to use the same thread and get lazy if you're using lining of a different color, okay? So let's go ahead and get started with this jacket. Go ahead and grab, I'm going to tell you the pattern pieces you need and what you need to do for them. So let's go ahead and get right on into this pattern. and starting with the pattern pieces. All right, so let's go ahead and start with the pattern pieces. Like I said, you need pattern piece 1 through 5, but I want to show you on camera. Now, I traced my pattern pieces out simply because I have done this before. I did this jacket when I did hashtag sewing 5 and below. I did it as a color block jacket, which I will show you what it looks like. I will put the photos up on the screen so you can see it, okay? Now, the pattern piece number 1 for view A, which is the jacket, you need 2 of fabric, 2 of lining, and then you will interface 2. The 2 that you are interfacing is your main fabric. So you need to interface both of your main fabric pieces, okay? Now, I am cutting a size 18, and I have already done my measurements, transferred all my notches and my dots as well, okay? You also need pattern piece number 5, which is the lapel. You need to cut 4 of these and interface 2. Next pattern piece is pattern piece number 2, which is your upper back. You need to cut 2 of fabric and 2 of lining. Next pattern piece is pattern piece number 4, which are your sleeves. You need to cut 2 of fabric and 2 of lining. And the last pattern piece that you need to cut is pattern piece number 3, which is your lower back. You need to cut 1 on the fold of fabric and 1 on the fold of lining. However, if you are using a print like I am not cutting the lining out of print. I'm just going to cut the same fabric. So I will be cutting 2 on the fold of my main fabric. All right. Now that's all the pattern pieces that you need. So let's go ahead and get right on into the sewing. All right, so go ahead and grab pattern piece number 1. This is your front. You should have cut 2 of fabric, 2 of lining. Now I'm only going to be using 1 to show you, but you're going to do this for both of your both of your front pattern pieces as well as your lining pattern piece, okay? So the first thing you want to do is go ahead and pin out your darts. We have done darts so many times on this channel. So all you're going to do is go ahead and pin out your darts. Now the first thing I want to say is to interface this front pattern piece, okay? Before you pin your darts out, make sure you interface this pattern piece. When you do your interfacing, cut it out. You do not need to cut out any of the marking or make your dots or any of that stuff. You just want to cut it out. And then once you interface it, then you want to go back and mark all your notches, your dots, and all your markings, okay? So I'm going to go ahead and pin out my darts for both my front as well as my lining. So go ahead and do that now. All right, so now that I have my darts pinned out for my front and my lining, I'm just going to go ahead and sew my dart. I'm going to use a regular length stitch of 2.5. I'm gonna back stitch at the beginning and sew all the way to this point, but I will not be back stitching at the point. I will just be pulling a thread and tie it 2 or 3 times. So go ahead and do your darts for both your front as well as your lining. For both pattern pieces, go ahead and do that now. All right, so now that I went ahead and sewn in my darts, I also pressed my darts down towards my jacket instead of up towards my sleeve, I guess you could say, the top. So make sure you press your darts down. Go ahead and move pattern piece number 1, your front and the front lining, off to the side. One thing I want to mention is in the instructions, it tells you to ease stitch between the 2 dots. I know when I made this jacket before, I did not have to, but I went ahead and did it this time just in case you may need to, okay? Just to show for the sake of the tutorial, all right? So go ahead and ease stitch. Ease stitch is done at the longest stitch on your machine. Now, I created my ease stitching using a 1/2 inch instead of 5/8. You guys know why, because I don't want to unpick it once I put everything together. So you would ease stitch using the longest length on your stitch, and you're just creating one line. It's not gathering whatsoever. It's just one line at a 1/2 inch seam allowance between the dots, okay? Now I'm gonna move that off to the side. Grab pattern piece number 2. which is your upper back. And this one you should have cut 2 of fabric and 2 of lining. And what we're going to do here is we're going to go ahead and stitch our center back seam. Now, I'm going to move my lining off to the side because you guys know I'm doing this all at the same time. So what you want to do is go ahead and pin your center back. Alright, so now that I have my center back seam sewn using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance, back stitch at the beginning and at the end, sew using a regular length stitch of 2.5 at 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. Once you sew your center back seam together for both your lining and your main fabric, go ahead and press your seams open. Go ahead and do that now. Okay, so now that I have the center back seam sewn, I have them pressed open for both my lining as well as my main fabric. The next thing you're going to do is, with right sides together, you're going to go ahead and attach at the shoulder seams, okay? So go ahead and grab pattern piece number 1, fronts, and you're gonna do the same thing to the back, the lining fabric as well. And what I'm going to do is, with right sides together, I'm going to pin my front to the back at the shoulder seam. So go ahead and do that now for both your front pattern pieces, your main fabric, as well as your lining. Alright, so now that I have my shoulder seams pinned for both my front and my lining using a regular length stitch, using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance, back stitch at the beginning and at the end, and sew across your shoulder seams for both your main fabric and your lining. Go ahead and do that now. Alright, so now that I have my shoulder seam sewn on both my main fabric and my lining fabric, go ahead and move your front out of the way and grab pattern piece number 3, which is your lower back. And what you're going to do for the lower back, like I said, I have 2 cut on the folded fabric. One I'm going to use for my lining and one I'm going to use for my main fabric, but it's the same thing you're going to do. So just open it out. And what you want to do is go ahead and stay stitch along the upper portion of your lower back, okay? After you stay stitch, what we're going to do is go ahead and attach it to the bottom of our back, all right? So if you have not stay stitched, go ahead and stay stitch this area. And then what we're going to do is, with right sides together, grab your back pattern piece. Well, I'm saying your entire jacket, okay? So grab your back, and then what you're going to do is, with the right sides together, you are going to pin, matching up the notches here, to match up both notches, and then just pin all the way across. So go ahead and do that now. Now that I have the lower back pinned to my back using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance, back stitch at the beginning and at the end, and sew across your bottom and press your seams up towards the jacket instead of down towards the lower back. Go ahead and do that now. All right, so now that I went ahead and sewn the lower back to the back of the jacket, so I did all of that, and if you look, you will notice that the sleeves are in as well. Now I went ahead and sewn my sleeves for my main fabric. Now I sewn one sleeve for my lining, but I'm going to show you how you do your sleeves and what we're going to do for the sleeves, okay? So this is what the main fabric of the jacket is looking like. It's coming together very well. So just go ahead and move the main fabric out of the way, grab your lining, and once again, I sewn the lower back, which is the same fabric as the main fabric, to my lining. And the reason why is because this portion is going to show. I don't want this, my lining, to show on the wrong side. So that's why I went ahead and did a different fabric for my lining, okay? Now I did go ahead and do my sleeves for on one side. So basically, I went ahead and did the flat method for my sleeves. After I did the flat method, I left a 5-inch opening on my underarm seam, which is right here. Reason being is because I'm going to turn it out through that opening and have a clean lining on the inside and on the outside, okay? So that's why I am leaving a 5-inch opening on both sleeves and one side seam, okay? So this is the 5-inch opening on this side. On the other side, I'm going to do the same thing and leave a 5-inch opening on my sleeves and then leave another 3-inch opening on the side seams, okay, in order to pull it out. All right, so what I did, if you do not know how to do the flat method, you could go back to the video about the top where I do the flat method in that video. So I went ahead and sewn in my sleeves. I pressed my sleeve, the seam allowance, towards the sleeves, okay? So the next thing you're going to do is, with right sides together, we're going to go ahead and pin our sleeve and our side seam, okay? So just go ahead and turn it. And you want to match up your underarm seam and pin there. You also want to match up the sleeve seam allowance right here. Make sure your sleeves is pressed open. All seams need to be pressed open if you are doing the lining. If you are just serging your jacket together and not doing the lining, you could just serge together, or you could serge them one seam at a time, however you see fit for that. But if you're doing the lining, you want your seams to be pressed open, okay? Now what I'm going to do is, on my sleeve, I'm going to measure 5 inches from this notch, all right? So this notch down 5 inches, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So I'm going to put a pin right there at that 5-inch. I'm gonna actually put 2 pins. Then that way it tells me that I need to sew from the hem up to these two pins right here, and then start at this pin and sew all the way to the other pins that I'm going to put there, okay? So go ahead and pin your sleeve now, and then we'll pin our side seam. So go ahead and do that now. All right, so now that I have the sleeve pinned, the next thing we're going to do is pin our side seam. So I'm going to put a pin right here at this double notch that you have. Make sure that you have your dart facing down towards the jacket instead of up towards the sleeve. And then I'm gonna measure from that double notch 3 inches down. I'm gonna do 4, just for, you know, safe measures. 1, 2, 3, 4. And then I'm gonna put a pin right there. So I know I'm gonna put 2 pins actually, so I know that I need to leave that area open from that notch down 4 inches. Then I'm gonna pin the remainder of my side seam. So go ahead and pin your side seam now. All right, so now that I have the side seam pinned, starting at the underarm seam or the hem of the sleeve, using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance and a regular length stitch, you're gonna back stitch at the beginning, so all the way to these double pins, and then back stitch there. After you back stitch, you're gonna break your thread, start at this pin right here, back stitch there, so all the way to the double pin that you have right here on the side seam. I'm sorry, the notch. You're gonna sew from that pin right here all the way to the pin where you have that notch, which I'm going to put 2 pins here. It's 2 pins there. To this part where it's 2 pins, you're gonna sew there, back stitch, break your thread, move down to this double pin, back stitch there, and then sew all the way to the hem, the end, which is the hem of your jacket, all right? And back stitch at the hem. Once you do that, go ahead and press your seams open. Go ahead and do that now. All right, so now that I have the side seam and my sleeve done, I'm going to show you this, because if you don't know that there is a opening of 4 inches on the underarm seam, And then on the side seam, there's an opening there for me to turn it out once I sew it all together, the lining to the main fabric. All right, so now what you want to do is go ahead and move your lining off to the side and grab pattern piece number 5, which are your lapels. Okay, and now and like I said, I have mine. You know, I traced this out a long time ago when I did hashtag sewing 5 and below. All right, so you should have cut 4 fabric and interface 2. So the 2 that you have interface, just make sure you turn it with right sides up right here. And then what we want to do is make sure we pin one non-interface lapel to one interface lapel. All right sides together. And what you're going to do is pin across around the sides and the bottom. You're going to leave the notch edge where you have the notches right here unpinned. Okay, so do not pin that area. All right, you're just going to pin across the top, around the sides, and the bottom. All right, so that's what you're going to pin. You're going to leave the other part open, and you're just basically going to stitch around using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. Okay, so go ahead and pin. Take it to your sewing machine and stitch across around the front and the bottom using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance and a regular length stitch. Once you do that, trim it down and turn it out and press it. So go ahead and do your lapels now. All right, so now that I have the lapels sewn together using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance, the top, around the front, and the bottom, I'm gonna go ahead and trim it down. Now that I have it trimmed down, I'm going to do this one in just a second. Now that I have it trimmed down, I'm going to go ahead and turn it out. You may need your point turner. If you have one, just make sure you have your point turner to poke out any sharp edges. So I'm going to go ahead and use my point turner. Make sure that I have this nice point right here. Do not rip a hole through it though. And then what you're going to do is go ahead and press it, give it a good press, and then you want to base. Now I am going to base this at about 1/4 of an inch just to keep it closed on both lapels. So go ahead, turn your lapel out, give it a good press, and then base across this notch edge. So go ahead and do that now. All right, so now that I have the lapels done, this is what they're looking like. So what you're going to do is go ahead and grab your jacket, the main fabric of your jacket, and what we're going to do is we're going to attach the lapel to the jacket right side together, but you want to make sure you know which side is your interface side and which one is your main side. So my interface side is pretty much peeking up, but it's okay. I'm all right with that. And what you're going to do is you're going to pin the lapel to your jacket. All right, so you should have a notch right here in your jacket, which I need to make mine right there. And you're going to pin that portion of your lapel there, okay? And you're just going to pin right there. And then you have your, mine is, I have the wrong one. Make sure you have the right one, right lapel, okay? So I had the wrong one, so I just switched. So make sure you pin at that notch, pin at that dot at the very top, and then you're going to pin along the rest of your jacket and the lapel. So go ahead and do that now. All right, so now that I have this one done, I'm going to show you how to do the other one. One thing I want to mention is, you know how your lapel should sit, right, on your jacket. If I had this one turned the wrong way, which means that if I had it this way, my lapel is not correct. So you want to have it going this way when you're looking. I'm going to show you this way. So if you're looking at your jacket, let me turn it to where you could see it. When you look at your jacket, your lapel should look like a lapel. If I would have stitched it the opposite direction, my lapel would have been facing the wrong way, right? It would have been down instead of up. So that's why I made sure, you have to make sure that you are using the right piece for that section, all right? Now, once again, this portion right here needs to go towards the top portion of my jacket. So you should have this portion up towards the top portion of your jacket, all right? Find your notch. My notch is right here, and you want to pin. Then you have that dot that's right here at your shoulder seam. You need to pin that dot to the shoulder seam, and then pin along the rest of the lapel and jacket. So go ahead and do that now. All right, so now that I have my jacket, my lapel pinned to my jacket, using 3/8 of an inch seam allowance and a basting stitch, I'm just going to baste the lapel onto my jacket. So go ahead and do that now. All right, so now that I have my lapels onto my jacket, it's just basted on. The next thing you want to do is go ahead and grab your lining. You are on the home stretch right now. And what we're going to do is pin our lining to our jacket. Now what you're going to do is, with right sides together, we're going to pin our lining to our jacket all the way around, all right? So just go ahead and pin your jacket to your lining now. All right, so now that I have it pinned, my lining to my main fabric of my jacket, I made sure that my sleeves are to the inside and it is not in the way of my pinning, okay? Now, I'm going to start at the center back right up here, back stitch at the beginning, and you're going to sew using a regular length stitch and 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. So you're going to back stitch at the beginning, sew all the way around. Now what I'm going to do, because you will need to understitch this jacket, so because of that, I'm going to start in the back, come all the way down, and then I'm going to basically stop in the center at the bottom. After I do that, I'm going to press my seam allowance towards the lining and understitch. Once I do that, I'm going to start back at the center back and do the other side and do the exact same thing. All right, so go ahead and sew all the way around and understitch now. Okay, so I wanted to say this because I did this portion and then I stopped to show you. So one thing I want to say is, I pinned it all the way around, but I did not sew the bottom, and there's a reason for that. Because you need to understitch, this is what I'm going to tell you, and it's a tip, and then I'm going to sew the bottom and finish off my sleeves and stuff. All right, so first things first is I went ahead and add my label. Now, you can add your label in after you understitch like I did. This is the reason why I did not do the bottom yet. So what I did was I attached it from the center all the way to the side where you have this right here before you attach the bottom, the side seam, okay? And I sewed all the way around from the side seam all the way around to the other side seam. Then I understitch. Now you need to understitch on your lining, not on your main fabric, okay? You should be able to get majority of all of your fabric underneath your sewing machine in order to do your understitching, okay? Now that I have that out the way, now I'm going to, now that I have understitched as much as possible, right? Now what I'm going to do is turn it back right sides together and finish off my bottom, and then I'm going to pull that out through the opening on the side, okay? So go ahead and do the bottom and then pull it out, pull the entire thing out through that side opening. Go ahead and do that now. All right, so now that I have the bottom portion of my lining and jacket completely sewn together, the only thing that's left for you to do is do your sleeve and close out this. Now I am going to hand sew this close instead of using my sewing machine, but if you decide that you want to use your sewing machine, you just need to stitch this down. Just make sure you do not get the wrong side, well, the right side of your jacket. You just need to basically stitch about 1/4 of an inch just to close that up if you're doing it on your sewing machine. I'm going to hand sew it because I want it to look really good and, you know, professional versus just a stitch with my sewing machine. Sometimes I do that even though I don't like hand sewing. Sometimes it's necessary. All right. Now, in order to finish off your sleeves, the first thing you want to do is you have a opening right here, all right? So what you want to do is put this right side together, right? So what you're essentially doing is you're going to pull both of them through. But what you want to do is you want to take this and fold it in, basically about a good 5/8 of an inch. So this is the wrong side, so you're folding that in. And then you want to take the lining and also do the same thing and fold that in. So you're folding the lining in 5/8 of an inch, and you're folding the main fabric 5/8 of an inch as well. Now you're going to pin both of those together, come through that opening, make sure you're holding it as well, and you're gonna pinch and bring both of those through that opening, okay? And it's going to look like this. Once you bring it through the opening, now you could fix it, okay? And what you're going to do is, now you have right sides together, you're gonna make sure that you pin that to the underarm seam, right sides together, pin the underarm seams, and then you're just basically going to pin all the way around, all right? So just pin your the hem of your sleeves all the way around. So go ahead and do that now. All right, so now that I have my sleeve hem allowance pinned all the way around using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance and a regular length stitch, you're going to start at the underarm seam, back stitch at the beginning, so all the way around, and back stitch at the end. Once you do that, trim your seam allowance down and then turn it right side out and give it a press. So go ahead and do that now. All right, so now that I have my lining and my main fabric attached at the sleeves, the sleeve hem to hem it. So what I'm gonna do is, I already trimmed it down, so what I'm gonna do is, through this opening in my lining, I'm going to push it all back through, just like that. Then I'm going to go ahead and fix my sleeve to show you what it looks like, all right? So now what you see is the lining, and you see that this is a finished sleeve right here, okay? So it's hemmed very nicely. This is what it looks like if you're looking at the lining, right? Now I'm gonna turn it. Now don't forget to close out this sleeve right here, this opening right here in the sleeve. You could do it on your machine at about 1/4 of an inch seam allowance. Just make sure you do not attach the main fabric if you do that. However, I am going to hand sew it while sitting on the couch. That is what I'm going to do, all right? Now what it looks like after you do that is, you pull it out, you have a nice clean sleeve. There's no openings in the main fabric, all right? Well, that is all for this sew along. This is what your jacket should look like. Make sure you give it a good press. Make sure you give it a good wash as well before you wear it, to get out all the dots and all that good stuff. So yeah, this is what it's looking like. I'm going to wash mine before I wear it and give it a good press as well.
Yeah. Ooh, let's go. Wait. Hold on, Q. Yeah, feel like I'm at the tippy top of my game, looking down at the rafters. I had to sun these boys, can't leave them blasters. A lot of dudes, just some undercover actress. I don't fall for it, I'm privy to all your tactics. Yeah, so try again.
All right, so let's go ahead and get started with the pants for Butterick 6718. So this is a easy sew. This is a pair of pants, but it's fitted and it's tapered pants. Now, for the pants, you will need pattern piece 11, 12, 13, and 14. However, I am not doing facing for my pants. I want to do a waistband. So I'm only using pattern piece number 11 and 12. I will be using a waistband that I drafted that I'm going to show you. And then of course the only notion that you will need outside of thread is a 7-inch invisible zipper. Now my zipper is 9 inches, but you can use 7 inches, 9 inches, whatever suits your fancy, okay? Make note of the cutting layout. For view E, both of your pattern pieces need to be facing right side of the pattern up, as you see in the cutting layout. Now I am cutting a size 18. I did make a slight modification of adding a 1/4 of an inch. Basically all the way around the circumference would be an extra inch, making my hips 46.5 instead of the 45.5 that's on the printed tissue paper, okay? So this is the cutting layout that I am doing. The only 2 pieces I cut, once again, is pattern piece 11 and 12 out of both fabric and out of pattern tissue, basically. All right, so let's go ahead and get right on into the pattern pieces. What you need to cut if you are doing what I'm doing and adding a waistband versus just doing the facing piece. If you are doing the facing piece, you can just follow along with what to do for the facing from the instructions, all right? And this is view E on that pattern. So like I said, you only need 2 pattern pieces, which is pattern piece number 11, which is the front. You need to cut 2 of fabric for that, and then pattern piece number 12, which is the back, and you need to cut 2. Make sure you transfer all your notches, your dots, and make sure you transfer your dart for both front and back. Now one thing that I will mention is I did not mark my dot for the side. Now this is for the zipper area right here, and it says for left side. However, I want mine on the right, so I'm going to wait until I have the pieces put together before I mark it. That way I will not forget which side to put my zipper on. All right, so that's why I have not marked my dot for the zipper placement. All right, outside of those 2 pattern pieces you will need, I have a waistband. Now I draft my waistband. This is the same waistband that I am using for the skirt as well. So take your waist measurement, minus 33, add a 1/2 inch, which gives me 33.5 along the length of it, and then it's 2 inches high. Now I'm going to cut 2 of fabric and also 2 of interfacing. However, if this is because it's cut on the fold, right? If you are not cutting this on the fold, your waist measurement, so basically what this is a total of 16.5 across by 2 inches high. That's because I'm cutting on the fold. If you are not cutting on the fold and you're just cutting 2 out, not on the fold, you would measure your waist measurement plus a 1/2 inch and then 2 inches wide. So when you open it out, I'm cutting on the fold just to save paper. That is the reason why mine says fold. You will have your total length of your waist, okay? Now that we talked about the pieces, let's go ahead and get right on into the sewing for the pants for Butterick 6718. All right, so let's go ahead and start with the pants. Go ahead and grab your front pattern piece, which is pattern piece number 11. Now I have already done this, and I did write 11 and an F for the front, but it's hard to see it, so that's why I have a clothespin to let me know that this is the front of my pants. Now the first thing you're going to do is go ahead and pin out your darts. Make your darts in both front pant legs as well as your back, okay? After you do that, go ahead and grab one front and one back, and we are going to go ahead and start working on our inseam, which is the inner leg portion of your pants. So grab one front and one back, right sides together, and we're going to pin our inseam. Now I'm going to pin both of them at the same time and then go to the sewing machine and sew my inseam. So go ahead and pin both of your inseams now. All right, right, so now that I have my front to back pinned at the inseam using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance and a regular length stitch, back stitch at the beginning and at the end, and sew your inseam. Once you do that, go ahead and finish off your inseam and do this for both of your leg pieces. Go ahead and do that now. All right, so now that I have my inseam sewn together, the next thing we're going to do is go ahead and sew our crotch seam. So with right sides together. Now this is my front right here where you have the single notch. So you have, I have my single notch right here. So this is my front, this is my back. You're gonna grab the other pant leg, and what you're going to do is with right sides together, make sure you have both of your backs. This is my back, this is my front, and what I'm going to do is sew the crotch seam, okay? Now remind you that the zipper is going on whichever side that you decide, so you're going to sew the entire crotch seam because this is not a back zipper. Now I'm going to make sure that my inseams, which is, you know, in between, you know, the seam that we just sewn, I'm going to make sure that that is going towards the back of my pants. So I'm going to make sure the seams are matching up and pressed towards the back, and I'm going to pin there. I'm going to pin at my single notch and at my double notches as well, and then just pin around the crotch curve. So go ahead and pin around your crotch now. All right, so now that I have my crotch seam or crotch curve pin using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance and a regular length stitch, back stitch at the beginning, and so all the way around your crotch seam and back stitch at the end. Once you do that, go ahead and finish off your seams as well. Go ahead and do that now. All right, so now that I have my crotch seam sewn and finished off, now what I'm going to do is open out my pants. This is my front, and if you notice, I have the F's for the front. And what I'm going to do is open it out, and with right sides together, I'm going to make sure I have my back, which is right here, and pin it on top of my front, okay? And we're going to go ahead and sew up the side seams, okay? Now, this is where you need to determine which side you want your zipper on. Now for me, I want my zipper on the right hand side, so I'm going to pin my pants, making sure that I get the right side. Now how you can do that is you could take your pants, put it up against you on the front, and of course you cannot see this on camera, and then mark which side you want your zipper to be on. Now because I want it on the right hand side, I put a pin right here, which lets me know that I do not need to pin that side, I need to pin the other side, okay? So what I'm going to do is with right sides together, I'm going to pin this side. So if you want your zipper on the left hand side, you need to pin the left hand side on your pants, okay? With the back looking up at you, right side of the fabric is facing down, and I'm looking at the back of my pants. If you, once again, I'm gonna repeat this. If you want your zipper on the right hand side of you, you need to make sure you pin up the right hand side. Basically pin the side you want your zipper on. So because I want it on the right hand side, I'm going to pin this portion right here. Make sure that the back is looking up at you, and you're going to pin the right side. However, if you want it on the left hand side, you are going to pin the left side of your pants, leaving the right side for you to place your zipper. All right, so I'm just going to pin the remainder of my right pants leg, or you know, basically the left one is really what it is. Looking at it, I'm gonna go ahead and pin that all the way down. So go ahead and pin your side seams of this pants leg now. All right, so now that I have this pant leg pin using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance and a regular length stitch, you're gonna back stitch at the beginning and at the end, and then finish off your side seam. Now, on the side where you are putting your zipper at, this is where you need to grab your pattern piece for your zipper. Now I am grabbing pattern piece number 12 simply because I am looking at the back of my pants once again. So what I'm going to do is place that down, and first of all I'm going to mark where the zipper is supposed to stop. All right, because I made an adjustment, I have to transfer that adjustment to my pants. All right, so I'm just gonna make a dot right there, and now I can see it. And make sure your dot went all the way through, okay? So I'm just gonna mark it right there. And now that lets me know that that is where my zipper will stop. So what I'm going to do is pin at that marking where my zipper will stop, and then I'm going to pin at the top, pin at the bottom, and then pin the length of my pants. So go ahead and pin the side seam of your pant now. Okay, so now that I have this side of my pant leg where the zipper is going to be pinned using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance and a regular length stitch, you're going to back stitch at the beginning and then sew all the way up to this dot for your zipper, back stitch there, break your threads, okay? And then you're gonna switch to a basting stitch and base from that dot all the way up, okay? Now, before we base from the dot all the way up, the only thing that I want you to do right now is using a regular length stitch, back stitch at the beginning, and then back stitch at this dot. What we're going to do after that is go ahead and clip to that dot without clipping through it and serge the area separately, not together. You're going to serge where the zipper is going to be. You can do it now, or you could wait until you get ready to do your zipper, all right? So go ahead and do both of those. So one side all the way up, 5/8 of an inch seam allowance, back stitch at the beginning and at the end, and finish off your seams. And then on this side, what I'm going to do is go ahead and finish off my seams individually from the top all the way down to that dot, and then 5/8 of an inch seam allowance, back stitch at the beginning and at the end, and then finish off my seams. Go ahead and do all of that now. All right, so now that I have my side seam sewn, this is the part where you want to try on your pants. Now I tried my pants on and it is a little tight, but it'll be okay because guess what? I am still going to rock these, and I could also give them away. They are a little tighter than what I would prefer, but it's okay because I did size them up an inch and it's just a little too tight. I did not take into consideration that this is a suiting fabric and it does not stretch over my hips. But it's okay, it's not like super tight, but I like a little bit of ease in my pants, but it'll work fine. Now, the next thing we're going to do is go ahead and add our waistband. Now, if you are doing the facing at this point, you want to go ahead and continue on with the facing starting at step number 11 in the instructions. Now, because I'm not doing the facing, I'm just gonna go ahead and grab both of my waistband pieces. Now, one will be used as your facing and one will be used as your waistband. So just put one off to the side. And what we're going to do essentially is basically just pin your waistband onto your pants, right sides together. And just pin all the way around. Now, remind you that we did the seam allowance at a 1/2 of an inch seam allowance instead of 5/8. So just make sure that after you pin your waistband to your pants, you will be sewing it with a 1/2 inch seam allowance instead of 5/8. So do not forget that step as well. So just go ahead and pin all the way around, pin the waistband all the way around your pants now. Alright, so now that I have my waistband pinned onto my pants using a 1/2 inch seam allowance, back stitch at the beginning and at the end, and sew all the way around your waistband. Go ahead and do that now. Alright, so now that I have my waistband attached to my pants, the next thing we're going to do is go ahead and install our zipper. Alright, so what you want to do is match up the seam allowance for your waistband, making sure that the waistband seam allowance is pressed up towards the waistband, and we're just going to pin from the top all the way down to that dot, which is right here. All right, so just go ahead and pin your zipper area now. Alright, now using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance and a basting stitch, you're going to start at the dot and baste all the way up. Once you do that, you're going to press your seams open and install your zipper. If you have not seen how to install a zipper, you go to any one of my dresses that requires a zipper, or a good one I will put in the description box below on how to install an invisible zipper. Alright, so go ahead and install your invisible zipper now. Alright, so now that I have my zipper sewn on, it zips up very well, no problems. I'm looking at the front of my pants now. This is the front. So what we're going to do is take the other waistband and attach it to the waistband. So the waistband facing now to the waistband. All right, now the first thing you want to do is, it doesn't matter which end you do it on, but you're going to press up a 1/2 inch seam allowance and then trim it down to about 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. Okay, after you do that, you're going to open out the zipper area and pin your waistband facing to the waistband. So make sure you grab some pins, and what you're going to do is just go ahead and pin your waistband facing. I'm calling this the waistband facing to your waistband all the way around. So go ahead and do that now. Alright, so now that I have the waistband facing pinned to the waistband, right sides together, using a 1/2 inch seam allowance, I'm going to back stitch at the beginning and sew all the way around and back stitch at the end. Once I do that, I'm going to press my seams up towards the waistband facing and then understitch. So go ahead and do that now. Make sure that you are understitching on the waistband facing, because it will turn onto itself instead of pushing out towards the waistband. So go ahead and do that now. Now that I have the waistband facing onto my waistband, right sides together, I sewed at a 1/2 inch seam allowance all the way around. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and, before I understitch, I want to make sure that I finish off my zipper area. Okay, so I'm just going to pin my zipper area. So just make sure that that waistband comes down. So basically that finished edge is about 1/8 of an inch over your waistband, and you're just going to pin, and then you're going to do the same thing for the other side as well. So we're just going to make sure that we have that pin and that press edge is pressed up, and then you're going to go to your sewing machine and sew the zipper teeth down to finish it off without sewing on the zipper. Once you do that, you're going to understitch, and you're going to understitch on the facing and not on your waistband. All right, so go ahead and do that now. All right, so now that I went ahead and attached my waistband facing to my waistband, I trimmed it using a 1/2 inch seam allowance. I trimmed it down. Then I went ahead and understitch, which is what you see right here. I understitched, and then what I did was I made sure that I had the press edge about 1/8 of an inch over the stitching line, this stitching line, and I'm going to stitch in the ditch all the way around to encase that pressed edge and finish off my waistband. All right, so that's what I'm gonna do for mine. You can hand stitch if you would like to. I did go ahead and put in my daughter's label because, you know, listen, I don't want to use all of mine yet and I need to order some, so I just went ahead and put in my daughter's label right there. Once you finish off your waistband at your label, the only thing left for you to do is go ahead and hem your pants. Now the hem is 1 1/4 inch, so just basically create a basting stitch all the way around, press to that line, and then press it up. Now I would highly advise you to try them on before you make your hem, because sometimes depending on your height it can be short. I don't want mine to be short, so I did try mine on, and I am only going to press up 5/8 of an inch instead of 1 1/4, okay? Because I don't want it to be short pants, okay? Once you do that, you are all done with your pants, and I hope you enjoyed this sew along. If you decide to make these pants, the jacket, the skirt, the top, or even the dress, make sure you tag me at Rochelle.Handmade.Designs on Instagram. So thank you so much for watching. Until next time. All right, so there you have it. That is the complete sew along for both the jacket and the pants. Once again, do not forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Turn on the notification bell so you are notified every time I upload a new video. So I'll catch you in the next video, and as always, keep sewing.
Working a 9 to 5, I had to go and feed the guys. Nobody did it right, I had to show them how to grind. I had to beat the odds, this is the life I live for God. Taking a step at a time.